premiumbeat.com. premiumbeat.com. premiumbeat.com.
Well, I think like most new scientific theories, it met with a mixed reception, and there were certain churchmen who vigorously opposed it, and they opposed it on grounds that it was inconsistent with say the biblical record of creation, that it seemed inconsistent with the unique place of human beings in the standard Christian narrative. However, there were prominent churchmen who supported Darwin's theory for various reasons and thought that it was a gift to Christian theology. Aubrey more famously said that in the guise of an enemy, Darwin's theory did the work of a friend. So that Darwin's theory met in religious circles with a mixed reception, indeed in much the same way that it did in scientific circles.
So let's get started. The first position we will consider is young earth creationism. Young earth creationism is the position held most to by Christians across North America, and it was a standard position on origins before Darwin came along. It can be defined as belief that God supernaturally created the earth 6 to 10,000 years ago and that he created all different kinds of animals. Variation from these originals is simply due to natural selection. Young earth creationists believe in microevolution or speciation, but do not believe in macroevolution, which is one type of organism evolving into another type of organism. Young earth creationists argue strongly for a very literal reading of the opening chapters of Genesis, emphasizing that it is a straightforward narrative that can be interpreted in no other way. They poke holes in modern evolutionary theory and attempt to interpret all data from a young earth perspective. For example, homologous structures and gene similarities that are used as evidence for evolution, in their eyes, is simply God using the same ideas in all of nature. Despite what one might initially think, young earth creationism is still alive, and it is kept alive by a handful of scientific proponents and young earth creationist groups all over the world. Problems and critiques of young earth creationism. Young earth creationists are often accused of ignoring much of the evidence in favor of an old earth and macroevolution. Leaders within the movement had said that creationists should avoid using the line, "God made the earth to look old," but sometimes use this line themselves when they have been argued into a corner. Not to mention the fact that if God did do this, he might seem like a great deceiver. Young earth creationists also have trouble explaining away the long distances in an expanding universe of billions of years. Young earth creationists have also been accused of abusing the implications of the second law of thermodynamics. Next, we will consider intelligent design. or ID for short. ID theory is based on critiques of the evolutionary model as it stands today. Proponents describe the model as insufficient to arrive at the complexity and information we see in life today. Unlike young Earth creationists, they do believe in evolution, but they simply see it inadequate to explain information and complexity in biology all on its own. They posit that an intelligence is adequate to explain these phenomena. The source of this intelligence is usually not named, but all that is stated is that an intelligence was involved and intervened in the process of evolution across millions of years. Proponents of ID have often critiqued the idea of abiogenesis, and they state that evolution is more difficult to achieve than it seems. One ID proponent, Michael Behe, has argued from cell complexity, stating that all parts of a cell need to be there in order for the cell to function. He then argues against the astronomical improbability that all of these parts evolved independently yet simultaneously. ID proponents also like to argue from what is called the Cambrian explosion. Their interpretations of the opening chapters of Genesis are more liberal than their creationist counterparts. Problems and critiques of intelligent design theory. Opponents of ID theory have often pointed to the limited function or non-function of certain organs and structures within organisms and point to this as bad design on behalf of the designer. For example, the blind spot in the human eye. Also, the target of examples used by ID proponents is usually changing from things like the eye, then to the bacterial flagellum, and later on to DNA. There's also little to no way to test a miraculous or intelligent intervening in the process of evolution millions of years ago. ID also has no general theory of biological design. It's a lot of ideas thrown out, such as irreducible complexity. Also, in 2005, the Supreme Court labeled ID as not science and banned it from US classrooms. ID proponents have also been accused of using God of the gaps reasoning, which is inserting God into any unknown phenomenon. And theologically, they've been accused of labeling God as a clumsy creator who has to keep intervening in the creation of life. The final position we will consider is theistic evolution, or TE for short, and sometimes called evolutionary creationism. TE holds to modern evolutionary theory as it stands. Their main position is that all that science has said about our origins is true and that this is not incompatible with Christian belief. Unlike young Earth creationists and most ID theorists, evolutionary creationists accept abiogenesis, complex structures and information being arrived at solely by evolution, and man sharing a common ancestor with the great apes. On the position of TE, God's role in creation is merely bringing everything into being at the Big Bang, and then through his natural providence, yet without direct intervention, ordering and setting up the world to arrive at the set end goal he had in mind, and this is presumed to be our existence.
When we come to the early chapters of Genesis, my own view is quite clear on this, that the early chapters of Genesis are not meant to be read as a scientific textbook. They are there fundamentally to tell us who God is and what he thinks of human beings, and indeed something about the nature of human beings. And therefore, I don't myself want to read back a time scale into Genesis 1, 2 and 3 and try and date the universe by these stories. Now, that's not to say that they're simply stories that were created to tell a theological story. I think they are truth in that they are inspired by God. And they tell us some fundamental things about the nature of God and the nature of human beings. When it comes to understanding the question of human origins, the Adam and Eve story for me is profound in lots of ways. It says, for example, that we are made of dust. There's something about our continuity with the rest of creation. And therefore, I don't worry about the fact that the evolutionary process means that we share a great deal in common with the rest of creation. You know, at a genetic level, we're not too different from cauliflower in that sense. There is continuity between human beings and the rest of creation.
Problems and critiques of theistic evolution. Because it accepts the neo-Darwinian paradigm, theistic evolution inherits all of the critiques and loose ends of the theory as it stands today. Also, some theistic evolutionists seem to want God's intervention in the evolution of morality, but this is inconsistent with their prior commitment to solely natural explanations of our origins. Critics of theistic evolution have also pointed to theological problems they believe TE creates. For example, they believe an omniperfect God would not use such a wasteful process as evolution, and this is said to taint God's character. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this? First of all, I think this shows that the Christian is not necessarily committed to young earth creationism. There at least seems to be different options for the Christian to embrace regarding this issue. Secondly, it shows that evolution is not incompatible with God's existence. In other words, on its own, it's not an argument for atheism. Because of this, I believe, third, that Christians should have no fear to enter the scientific realm, and in my own opinion, that they should boldly enter into the scientific fields.
A lot of famous scientists, E.O. Wilson for that matter, says that the next 100 years will be the next 100 years of biology. It will be the century of biology. His idea is that the last century really belonged to physics and all of these advances that were made in physics, but now it's biology's turn, and we really are going to need students and kids and scientists that understand the principles of evolution.
So, what is my point in all this? Well, I hope that to the believer the message has been clear, that you need not fear science, biology, or even evolution for that matter. But do know that whatever position you choose to take, you must be consistent with the evidence. As Socrates said, we must follow the argument where it leads. I did present criticisms of the views I presented in this video to get a broader spectrum for the whole issue, but also to show that if we want to answer these criticisms to this or any other view, we have to get into the science, and there is no way around this. But that doesn't need to be a chore. Science can be a very exhilarating thing to do, and I also did this because I wanted to not show any of my personal bias and to just get the information out there. Science is advancing, and Christians shouldn't need to stay behind. And there have been many Christians who have been very successful scientists and made great contributions to our knowledge. What about to the unbeliever? Well, I believe this has implications for you as well. As I said before, evolution on its own is not an argument for atheism, so you don't need to feel inclined to be non-religious necessarily if you're studying biology. Also, I hope that by doing this, I can help tear away at some old notions and prejudices on both sides and help us become closer as seekers of truth, as students, scientists, and society in our search for knowledge. Thank you.